Today we're going to discuss the first symptom that occurs with gallstones over 80% of the time. Okay. And I'm also going to talk about the fastest way to dissolve a gallstone if you have a gallstone. And let's dive right into the first symptom that occurs over 80% of the time. And that would be asymptomatic. That's right. There's no symptoms 80% of the time when a person has gallstones, right? You don't even know you have them unless they get lodged into a duct where it creates distension and pressure. You might even not know you have them until they get really bad. Other than that, are there any other symptoms? And yes, there is. You're normally going to feel a sensation underneath the right rib cage, kind of like a fullness, a tightness, or a pain. You may feel pain in your right rhomboid, that muscle between your scapula and the mid part of your spine and the back part there. You may even have pain that runs up to this side of your face right here. These are all indications that there's something going on with the gallbladder. It doesn't necessarily have to be a stone. It could be very small microstones that are really hard to identify even on an MRI. You can also experience nausea, vomiting, bloating, belching, jaundice. Now, why would you have jaundice, like where your skin is yellow? Well, that's because the gallstone is blocking the bile duct and we're getting a backup of bile into the liver, and that is coming out through into the blood and into your skin. And some of that is something called bilirubin, which is kind of a byproduct of your red blood cells, and that can create a yellowing effect of your skin. You may also notice that your urine is darker than it should be, yet your stool is pale. It's no longer dark brown. Now, let's talk about how to get rid of a gallstone really quick. It really is important for you to understand what causes a gallstone first, and that will explain everything. Many people think gallstones come from consuming too much fat, fatty foods, right? Or foods high in cholesterol, because a gallstone is made out of cholesterol. So just by knowing that, if you eat more cholesterol, you're at risk for getting a stone, right? Well, actually, no, you're not. The reason why stones develop is for two reasons. One is you have this high amount of cholesterol coming through the body, and this is the most important thing, you have a lack of bile salts. And this number two thing is usually ignored. They think it's just the cholesterol. But what keeps the cholesterol thinned is the bile salts. Bile is the primary mode of elimination of cholesterol. Okay, it goes to the bile ducts. The more bile you have, the more elimination of cholesterol that you have. So in reality, you develop gallstones because you don't have enough bile. Okay, and all of those symptoms that I mentioned are really symptoms of a bile deficiency. You have this gallbladder, right? It's not an extra organ that you're developing. You really need the gallbladder intestine to help you break down the fats. If you just put bile into the small intestine without it being concentrated, you're not nearly going to have the effect that you should to help extract the fat soluble nutrients like vitamin A, D, E, K1, K2, omega-3 fatty acids, things like that. And so this bile helps break down this fat to a certain degree, but then the pancreas releases its enzyme called lipase to help break it down even smaller. And so when you don't have a gallbladder, because they removed it, now you just have a tube from your liver to the small intestine. Okay. You don't get any more concentration of the bile. And then you may have a hard time digesting fats and absorbing these fat soluble nutrients. Now, on a rare occasion, when they do the surgery, they might have made this duct maybe a little bit too big. And now we get too much bile coming into the small intestine. And the biggest symptom for that would be diarrhea. And also not enough bile is constipation. And there's another term I want to tell you about. It's called cholestasis. And I think that's a really common problem where you don't have a stone. It's kind of like sludge. So you have bile sludge. It's a lot of cholesterol, but you don't have enough bile, and it kind of just sits there and it causes a lot of pain. And you do the ultrasound, you don't see any stone. There's also a syndrome that occurs after you have your gallbladder removed that you now have complications too. And I want to bring that up because sometimes people will downplay that, but it can occur up to 40% of the time. And can you take a wild guess what the biggest symptom is after surgery? Cholestasis, this bile sludge. And that can give you the same symptoms as you had before you had the surgery with a gallstone, because they removed the stone, but they didn't remove the cause of the stone, which is the lack of bile problem. Other risk factors for getting gallstones would be pregnancy, because you have this spike in estrogen. Too much estrogen can put you at risk for a gallstone. Also, taking birth control pills, which is more estrogen, obesity, and type 2 diabetes, simply because you're going to have higher levels of insulin, which also can aggravate and increase the risk of gallstones. Liver disease can put you at risk. Why? Because the liver actually makes bile salts. Okay. And the more problems you have with the liver, whether it's fatty or liver disease, whatever, the less bile you're going to make. Constipation, I already talked about that. That can put you at risk. Actually, just the bile deficiency can cause the symptom of constipation. And also, if you're low in folate, okay, this could be more of a genetic problem, or just you don't consume any vegetables, so you don't get any folate. Folate helps the conversion of cholesterol to bile salts. So people that are on a statin drug don't have the cholesterol to make bile, and a lot of times they have a bile deficiency, and then they have all of these symptoms. Also, if you're on PPIs, these are antacids, that can create a big problem or an increased risk of gallstones, simply because you need that acid in your stomach to trigger the liver to release bile salts. A high carb diet, which increases insulin, can also put you at risk. And even a low fat diet can put you at risk. Why? Because one of the triggers for the release of bile is fat. And if you don't have enough, like let's say you're a vegetarian or a vegan, that could put you at risk for getting gallstones. So what is the solution? What do we do? This first solution is to take purified bile salts with some probiotic, one with meals, and you take one on an empty stomach twice a day. Okay. Sometimes you need more, but you're going to take this over a period of time. What this is going to do, it's going to help to dissolve the stone, because we have a situation where we have a super concentrated amount of cholesterol, but not enough bile salt. So we need more bile salt. Realize that your gut makes bile too. So we really need to also support the microbiome with some probiotic. And I think a really good way to do that would be to consume like sauerkraut or kimchi or even kefir. Eating more salad would be beneficial. The fiber in the salad helps to bind with some of the cholesterol. So that's one cool thing. Also, you're going to get folate, which will help you make this conversion to make more bile. I would also manually massage underneath your right rib cage and the left rib cage to help maybe push some of this sludge through. And many times that will give you a tremendous amount of relief. And the last thing to do is to decrease your insulin, okay? Because insulin can increase your risk. And you do that two ways: intermittent fasting, and number two, going on a low carb diet. And if you're not familiar with that, I put a link down below. But I think the most important thing for you to watch now, because you're watching this video and you're concerned about gallstones, is to learn how to do this manual flushing, okay? This massage in your gallbladder. And I put that video up right here. Check it out.